I've had most of these in one room at the gallery, but I started using the room for storage too, so they've been sort of covered up. So it's really fun to get them out here and be able to see them all at once.
Because of course what is in here is the models that you create, which then in a way almost become like another tool for the work that you do. These aren't things that normally are there for public viewing because they're not what you consider finished products and things like that. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, this is where you do a lot of your creative work. You get an idea, but then you have to put it into 3D form. And so you're getting your idea down into a really solid form, and they help you to get to the end product. And they don't always look like the model. They don't have to all the time. So it's a tool, like you say.
Right. And is it pretty much imperative that you do have a model? Are there some times when you have created a limestone sculpture, especially one that is maybe more of an expansive nature, where there is not a model, first of all?
Well, I make a model, first of all, so we know what we're talking about.
In other words, a lot of these are for commission purposes, and so you've got something for the customer.
You have to make a model so you have something to point at. You just can't do it with your hands. And then you say, well, that isn't exactly what we had in mind. So you can always just make another model,
right,
or talk about variations on this one here. So it's a tool to get everybody to see what you're after. Well, I didn't make a model for the big horse I did for Stockton. I did a rather accurate drawing of it, and it wasn't curved or odd shaped. It was straightforward, so I didn't feel I needed a model. You know, I could look at horses or pictures and things like that, but to pin it down, they wanted a draft type horse. They didn't want a quarter horse or anything else. They wanted a strong thing to pull a plow, and so that way I could get my proportions down, so when you were done it would be proportioned right.
Right. And so they were comfortable with that. The fact there was no model wasn't an issue on that project. But that's definitely the exception to the norm then, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
As far as no models.
Well, when somebody talks about, well, we'd like to have a sculpture here, but we're not quite sure, that's pretty vague.
Yeah.
And so I have to sort of come up with some ideas, and then they can say, well, no, not that, maybe that, you know. And so it's sort of helping them pick out. But sometimes, like the one for Lindsberg, they said they wanted a statue of this artist's dog playing with children, and it just popped right in my mind. You know,
the image was there.
I could just see it, and I just made it in clay, and then I've done it in stone.
This buffalo, for instance, you know, being carved from a 24-ton piece of limestone, and granted it's a little bit larger, but even, you know, the priest or the nun or the pioneer family, they are such massive creations when they're done. How difficult is that to keep that all in perspective when you're working on the model?
Well, it's important to keep it in your mind, because I knew this buffalo was going to be seen from below.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of work on it from below. You have to look at it, get down and see it, you know, because it's so easy to work on a tabletop and then you take it out and blow it up and it's different. And you also have to have lighting all the time. You work in the studio and you got control light, but you have to take it outside, see how it looks too, with the sunlight on it. So light's so important to sculpture. But it's like you say, you have to really keep in mind that this is going to be seen from a certain angle, and so the sighting is real important. Some people have asked me, you know, how do you know when you're done? And this buffalo is a good example. I was carving out there. I was carving back up underneath here, underneath the belly and the forelegs, and this guy standing down the ground, he says, well, I can't see what you're doing. So I realized I was clear out of vision already, so I figured I was done.
At least with that part. At least with that part, yeah. It's like, I guess that's a good point of reference. Just keep other people around you, and they'll help you figure out when you're done.
They always say that a lot of the carvers in medieval churches, they'd carve the back of the statues. And people say, well, why you carve the back? You know, you can't see it. And he says, well, God will see it.
Oh, you never know who's watching, right? One thing I noticed on the buffalo and on a few others, we see a lot of markings. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. This is truly a tool. And the point of all these markings is?
Well, if you're standing in front of a stone that's 8 foot high and 10 foot long, you kind of got to know where you are. And so all these are marked off in numbers and in letters, so I could just sort of grid myself, and I knew
literally
I was at the shoulder. Or, you know, these are real important. And it also helps controlling. so you know where you are all the time. Otherwise, you're just out there in space with a big rock that's irregularly shaped that has nothing to do with the sculpture.
And when you're
because
that close, it's so
change.
difficult to see
you gotta
the
know where you are.
proportion.
And so all these things are, and after you get control, or you get everything sort of where you need it, then you kind of eyeball it. Then you just sort of say, well, we need a little bit more out there. It doesn't have to be precisely like the model. This is a real early Buffalo for me. I've done a few, but nothing on a scale like that, and I didn't know if I could do it or not. And also, the site was difficult because the hillside fell down right there next to it, and you couldn't walk out and look at it, you know, because you'd go down.
Right.
So it was really difficult getting the angle and the pitch of the head right. I really worked on that hard. I walked around, looked at it from across the road, and I was all over the place trying to make sure I'd had the nose just the right place, you know, and it turned out so much better than I feared, so it was really fun.
Now, in the case of that one, because it is up on a very high, lofty base, was the carving done up on the base? I mean, was that stone mounted on top of the base when it was complete?
We had a concrete slab stuck up there, ready for it, and it's on an old road bed. That's where the old road used to go, so I knew it'd be real solid, because you get this much weight, you're going to worry about chipping, so the bed was really hard. And so we just set the stone on top of there, and I went out there every day to carve on it. And I didn't know how long it would take, and I got
But at this point, was the stone up on that pedestal base?
It's just a big square stone up there, yeah, 24 tons. It came on a train, and we moved it out there with a big trailer, got hung up in that ditch, learned a lot that day, and then we had to stand it up, and then we had to pick it up and set it up there. And I carved on it for 2 years. I got it there 2 years beforehand, because I didn't know how long it would take.
Yeah.
And if I felt I was getting behind, I'd work harder. And if I felt I was ahead, I'd slow down, and it turned out just right.
So you did need the bulk of that 2 years to complete the project?
Yeah, I'll say.
So that was pretty much, that pretty much consumed all of your time for those 2 years?
Not all of my time, because after hammering 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, you get very tired. So I try to vary my work patterns. I do other things inside, smaller things, all kinds of things. So it was sort of like every day I'd go out there for 3 or 4 hours.
Wow, so 3 or 4 hours a day, almost every day for 2 years.
Yeah.
These, again, icon landmarks, at least for our own community here, kind of get you into some of those same concerns, don't they, as far as the integrity, you know, the lawman, that could be any law figure. But when you've got someone like Elizabeth Polly and Hickok and Cody, is that really tough? I would imagine then there's probably lots of research that comes into play, especially when you're looking at, you know, icons like Cody and Hickok.
Well, there wasn't any pictures of Elizabeth Polly, so I didn't have to worry about making her look like her. And you do something like Hickok, you got to get the guns right. And so that was crucial. Get the right kind of guns and in a sash like you wore them.
Because
like
again, that's not a placement that we kind of think of.
No, he was unusual. Yeah.
Did you catch any flack for that because so many people wouldn't know? I mean, were there people who said why?
You never see pictures of him wearing holsters. He just didn't seem to use them at all. And you never see him in a cowboy hat. He had this flat. See, he died in '76, and that's the year that they started making cowboy hats. So he never got a chance to wear one. You know, they just wore what they could, or sombreros, or some things like that. So you don't see these more cowboy type hats on Hickok. And sometimes you see a little wool cap, you know, like the Russians brought over, you know.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And so you just sort of have to decide which way you want to depict him. And Cody, I don't think it looks all that much like Cody. It's not a great portrait, but it was sort of like, you know, he was a really solid kind of guy, and that's what I was going for, the strength he had.
And that makes this one also kind of exciting in another facet. That is your first commission that you had ever done, which was 40 years ago about this time. How intimidating was that, to be doing this well-known icon and the first time that you were in a commission kind of a situation? Well,
I was just in the right place at the right time. A couple guys, I can't remember who it was, they came to me and they had this sort of drawing of a statue. And he says, now we're going to have a firm in Kansas City carve us a statue of Buffalo Bill, and somebody says, you're a carver, what do you think? Would you be interested in this? And they said, we're paying them $1,000. And I says, well, I'll do it for $250. So I got the job. And,
I know you didn't have to undercut that hard, Pete.
And
Felt less pressure if you really undercut, right?
Well, the thing is that it was my chance, you know, and
Yeah.
I jumped for it, and $250 for carving a great big hard stone statue like that
'cause
isn't very smart.
But you'd have been a man in your 20s, and this is the first time, and something that's important.
I put it in my dad's shop, and I carved it inside, and I learned don't carve large statues inside because I was always standing in this dust cloud. And that wasn't very smart, you know. That's why it's so nice I have a place where I can carve outdoors, where the light is good, and there's always a breeze. And so I learned a lesson that day.
But was this one fully carved inside?
Yeah.
The whole thing?
Yeah, and it's also bad because when you bring it out, you don't know how it's going to look in the sunlight, where it's going to be.
Right.
So I always try to carve them the direction that they're going to be facing, if possible, out there in the
And
water.
I would guess that makes sense because of limestone being this very monochromatic medium. You really are very dependent on the light and the shadows
Yeah.
that it's going to get because you can't create those.
Yeah, well, you could use texture to give tones different and things like that. But there's no point in painting limestone because after a couple years it'll just peel off. It just won't hold paint. And so you paint with shadows and you paint with textures, and you have to have that strong sun. We have perfect angle of our sun at this latitude. You know, we're in the same latitude as Spain and Italy and Greece. Perfect light coming down here. You know, if you're in the Arctic, the light's down here on the horizon. If you're in Africa, it's straight overhead. We've got perfect angle for outdoor sculpture here.
These are models that have never materialized in large sculptures, right?
That's right.
So, and what was the point of making them? Because it wasn't to prepare for a commission, was it?
My neighbor was Leora Stroop, who taught nursing down to college.
Right.
Before World War II, she used to fly with Amelia. They were
Actually
both
flew in
pilots,
planes
yeah.
with her.
Members of the 99 Club. And she had a lot of pictures of Amelia, of pictures I hadn't seen before. Some sort of glamorized Hollywood type and some out on the field, you know. I said, well, gee, you know, I've always admired Amelia so much, I thought I'd just sort of make some ideas in case a competition ever comes along. And so I did 3 studies and a head study. And right after that, not long after that, why, they said they wanted a statue of Amelia Earhart in the Capitol building. And I said, boy, I'm ready for that. Quite often I'll make a model of what I think there ought to be a statue of, you know, like of my farmer, you know. How many statues are there to farmers, you know? So I thought, you know, there ought to be one. And in this case, I just thought, you know, it's going to happen.
Is Amelia the only one you've ever carried out to this extent as
Yeah.
far as an unsolicited commission?
Yeah. And none of these poses would fit in the niche in the Capitol building, so I had to make another one so it would fit in the niche
Yeah.
and blend with the others.
Because
But-
as you said, this
yeah.
preceded and
But
sort
it
of
was,
set
I
you
made
up,
the model about the same scale, so it was just really fit in
allowed you
nice.
to do it. Well, let's check those out, what this sort of preceded. This was the project for our state capitol. Had they, in addition to Amelia, had they made a decision on who all 4 of the figures were going to be at the time that the call went out?
The Historical Society made the choices so they wouldn't be arguing on who it was. So they had a competition. Anybody from Kansas connections,
But they did want somebody tied to Kansas.
and they also wanted somebody who had done large portraits before, which eliminates a lot of
Yeah.
sculptors, you know, and I had done some, so I was ready. And so we had a finalist, were our last 3, and I went to all the places where these people came from, and I talked to White's daughter-in-law.
Oh, wow.
And looking for pictures, you know. Every picture I saw Arthur Camper, he's exactly like that. He was just standing there with his hat down to his side, his straw hat, you know. There was never any variation. He always stood that way. And with somebody like Eisenhower, he was always in a pose, you know. He was a
You
very
could find-
dramatic
yeah.
fellow, you know. And White, he was sort of like expansive, and he's got his newspaper. So, you know, it just sort of lent itself to these poses. I was trying to make them so you would recognize them. The lighting in the rotunda has no direction. It bounces around in there, so it's bland lighting. And they need, you know, they were made out in the sunlight, and when
Yeah.
you get the sun on them, it just makes any sculpture look better.
Right.
And so all I need is little bitty spots, but I told the janitor, you know, we got lights up there, why don't you just put a little spot? And he looked at me kind of funny, and I went to the guy who managed the Capitol building, and he looked at me kind of funny, and you know, it's like, I have no idea what that means, that going through all these bidding projects and doing all, changing anything in the Capitol building. And the governor says, well, if you have any problems, come in and see me. And I says, well, I'd sure like to put little spots. Nothing got done.
He looked at you funny.
Nothing. No, he didn't look at me funny. He thought you could do anything, but you can't. And so it's just poor lighting. Commissions are intriguing and interesting, but I've had so many lately all at once, and you know, they don't come in any form. It's just sort of maybe a bunch at once and none for another time. So I accepted so many that I haven't been able to do my other work that I want to do. I got a lot of long-range projects that I want to get back to. And,
Just personal things that you're interested
well, in the gallery, out on my wall near the gallery, I got a lot of stone laying around I want to carve, and so I just figured 40 years is enough.
Because that's what indeed this marks, is a 40-year history
That's right.
of commissioned work. And I'm sure you've had people ask this before. Why? Why do you get out there every day and hack away at the stone?
Well, because it's fun. I mean, that's it. It's fun. It's the most fun thing I've ever found to do. It's intriguing, it's difficult, it's challenging, and I got the opportunity, so.
And people like what you do, and that's got to be sort of the frosting on the cake.
Yeah.
This program is presented in part by the Kansas Arts Commission, a state agency, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.